A chill whispers down your spine. You are being hunted. You believe you see the world clearly, the toxic glint in someone's eye, the manipulative undertones in their voice, the blatant disregard for boundaries. But what if the true predators wear sheep's clothing, their poison masked by charm, disguised as kindness, perhaps even woven into the very fabric of your family? While you're busy shielding yourself from cardboard villains, you're leaving the gates of your mind wide open to something far more insidious. The invasive tendrils of another's unconscious creeping into your soul. Carl Gustav Jung dedicated his life to charting these treacherous unseen currents. Within the pages of the ego and the unconscious, he revealed a profound truth. The puppet masters of our lives reside not in the spotlight of awareness, but in the murky depths of the unconscious. This isn't just your truth, no. It is a universal decree, a shared human condition. And within this shared condition lies the chilling potential for danger. For when someone remains blind to the abyss within themselves, that ravenous shadow seeks a vessel, a willing host. And all too often, that host is you. Has the thought ever truly crossed your mind? Stop for a moment and really feel it. How many times have you felt utterly, inexplicably drained after a seemingly innocuous conversation? The weight of their words. How many times have you been unfairly burdened with blame for actions you never committed, or cast as the reluctant savior in a drama that wasn't even yours to begin with? Jung termed this insidious phenomenon projection. An unconscious maneuver where the other hurls their own disowned demons onto you, transforming you into a convenient scapegoat. From that precise moment onward, you cease to exist as an individual, becoming instead a mere symbol, a distorted mirror reflecting their inner turmoil, an imaginary foe conjured from their fears, an idealized hero birthed from their longing. And what do all of these phantom images share in common? Absolutely none of them are the real you. But the truly terrifying aspect of this psychological drama is that you often remain blissfully unaware of your role in it. You believe you're offering support, extending empathy, demonstrating maturity. Meanwhile, you are slowly drowning in a psychological swamp that isn't your own, desperately attempting to resolve conflicts that were never yours to begin with, and unknowingly being manipulated by psychic forces that you didn't create, but that now relentlessly control you. And don't be fooled, this isn't solely the domain of those with malicious intent. Jung cautioned us that the gravest dangers arise not from calculating perverts, but from the unintegrated, unconscious individuals who stumble through life. Lost souls. These are the people tragically divorced from their own psyches, shackled to masks, haunted by traumas, crippled by complexes, and driven by repressed desires. They are not inherently evil. They are simply dangerous, and their danger operates in chilling silence. It doesn't announce itself at the door. No, it seeps in slowly, insidiously, day by day, through seemingly innocuous comments, veiled accusations, and heavy, pregnant silences, until you begin to question the very foundations of your own reality. And when you lose contact with your own psychic truth, you become inextricably woven into their shadow. Perhaps you are experiencing this very scenario right now, within a romantic entanglement, a seemingly supportive friendship, a high-pressure work environment, even within the supposed sanctuary of your own family. And perhaps you are unfairly blaming yourself, desperately searching for the flaw within you. There is nothing wrong with you. However, there is something profoundly, disturbingly wrong with the way you are being exploited as a receptacle for someone else's festering unconscious. In this video, we will meticulously dissect the 6 archetypal figures that Jung would identify as emotionally dangerous types. Individuals who act not out of deliberate malice, but under the sway of internal forces they themselves fail to comprehend. And this very lack of awareness makes them so powerfully destructive. We will delve into Jung's own words, his pivotal concepts, his chilling warnings drawn directly from his seminal works, including Aeon, the Ego and the Unconscious, and Archetypes and the Collective Unconscious, to arm you with the knowledge to recognize these insidious profiles. But even more importantly, we will crack open your perspective to the unnerving possibility that perhaps, just perhaps, one or more of these profiles lurks within you as well. Are you ready to face the truth? Then brace yourself, take a deep, fortifying breath, and step into the light. But heed this warning. After hearing this, you will never be able to look at the people around you, or even at yourself in quite the same way again. Picture a life lived under constant scrutiny, someone who blames you for their every emotional fluctuation, someone who transforms your very presence into a trigger, someone who subtly convinces you that you are responsible for emotional avalanches that you didn't even cause. Initially, they appear fragile, exquisitely sensitive, profoundly deep. But in the agonizing march of time, you come to the gut-wrenching realization that you're being dragged, kicking and screaming onto a battlefield that isn't your own and where you are already hopelessly outgunned. This is the unconscious manipulator, someone tragically oblivious to the raw, gaping wounds they carry, projecting them outward onto others as a twisted form of psychic self-preservation. Jung wisely observed, "What we do not confront in ourselves, we will encounter as fate." And often, this cruel, ironic fate has a distinct name, a familiar face, and shares your very dinner table. The unconscious manipulator is an individual helplessly dominated by repressed material, unintegrated traumas, and unprocessed emotional fragments. Instead of turning their gaze inward to confront the source of their pain, they relentlessly aim their psychic artillery at you, turning you into a blank canvas for their relentless internal conflicts. This type of person exists in a perpetual state of projection. According to Jung, projection is an unavoidable function of the human psyche. But when it remains unacknowledged, it spirals into something monstrously destructive. In The Ego and the Unconscious, he eloquently argues that projection induces a kind of psychic blindness, a self-imposed prison where the other ceases to be seen as a unique individual and becomes tragically reduced to a mere symbol of what remains hidden, festering within us. This is precisely the destructive methodology employed by the unconscious manipulator. They do not truly see you. They perceive only a lost, fragmented piece of themselves and react to it as if it were palpably real. These individuals frequently cast themselves in the role of perpetual victim. Every misfortune, every perceived slight is always someone else's fault, never their own. When they succumb to rage, it's because you provoked it. When they are overwhelmed by sadness, it's because you cruelly disappointed them. When they are plagued by feelings of inferiority, it's because you arrogantly flaunt your superiority. This insidious distortion is so subtle, so pervasive, that you inevitably begin to question your own sanity. Was I really insensitive? Did I inadvertently say something hurtful? Am I the toxic one? And thus manipulation unfurls without a single raised voice, without a single overt demand being issued. It's a purely emotional, deeply unconscious, and devastatingly effective process. Even more disturbingly, these individuals are often possessed of an irresistible charm. They exude charisma, sensitivity, and a captivating aura of heightened emotional intensity. This creates a carefully constructed trap, luring you into the misguided belief that you can somehow help them, heal them, understand them on a deeper level than anyone else could. But what you're actually doing is sacrificing your own precious psychic health, futilely attempting to rescue someone who stubbornly refuses to dive into the murky depths of their own being. And the more fiercely you try to save them, the more irrevocably you sink. Jung wisely warns us that these insidious patterns of projection are particularly perilous because they ensnare us within a rigid symbolic role: savior, enemy, traitor, father, mother, anything and everything except the true, authentic you. And to exist within a symbolic bond is to exist within a carefully constructed illusion. You cease to be seen as a sentient subject and are treated instead as a grotesquely distorted reflection of the other's festering unconscious. The only viable means of protecting yourself from an unconscious manipulator is to cultivate unwavering self-awareness. Recognize their patterns. Sever the invisible threads that tether you to this person's convoluted emotional narrative. And most importantly, relentlessly question yourself. Is what I'm feeling truly mine, or has it been insidiously induced by their manipulations? Because the unconscious manipulator doesn't storm violently into your life. They quietly slip in through the chink in your armor, your empathy. And once you have successfully identified this insidious pattern, the next crucial step is to understand how it disguises itself even more cleverly behind the mask of the persona. The individual who not only projects, but actively performs, constructing their entire life around projecting an image of something they fundamentally are not. In the next section, we will delve into the character of the bearer of the persona and how they represent one of the most significant psychological risks identified by Jung. Because while the unconscious manipulator hurls their inner conflicts onto you, the bearer of the persona can drag you, willingly or unwillingly, into a distorted world where even you begin to forget who you truly are. Not all psychological hazards manifest as overtly extreme behaviors. Sometimes the danger lies in what appears to be too perfect the ever-present saccharine smile, the impeccably maintained posture, the flawlessly curated image. We exist within an era relentlessly defined by appearances, where seeming has tragically eclipsed the intrinsic value of being. And this pervasive societal obsession, according to Jung, presents a grave problem. Because when an individual becomes excessively identified with their own persona, the carefully constructed social mask we all use to navigate the world, they run the horrifying risk of severing their connection with their own authentic essence. And those who live solely for the mask not only tragically lose themselves, but also inevitably begin to distort the realities of everyone around them. In The Ego and the Unconscious, Jung eloquently argues that the persona represents what someone is not, but what he himself, as well as others, thinks he is. In other words, it is an artificial construct meticulously shaped by the relentless pressures of social, familial, and professional expectations. In and of itself, the persona isn't inherently detrimental. We all employ it to some degree. It enables us to effectively fulfill our assigned social roles, to be a competent doctor, a nurturing teacher, a supportive brother, a loyal friend. The trouble begins when someone misguidedly believes that they are only that role, when the mask becomes irrevocably fused to the face, and everything that is genuinely spontaneous, vulnerably authentic, and uniquely individual is ruthlessly locked away in the darkest basement of the psyche. The bearer of the persona is the undisputed master of functional superficiality. They effortlessly say precisely what others long to hear. They meticulously behave in the expected manner. They strategically avoid conflicts at all costs. But behind the carefully constructed curtain of self-control lies a soul slowly crumbling into ruin. Because the more relentlessly they strive to maintain the illusion, the more suffocatingly they constrict their own authentic self. And this chronic repression will, sooner or later, exact its devastating price. For those unfortunate enough to live in close proximity to this type of person, the impact is profoundly destabilizing. You can sense that something is deeply wrong, but you can't quite articulate what it is. There's a palpable lack of spontaneity, a disturbing absence of genuine truth, a frustrating dearth of depth in your interactions. Everything feels strangely rehearsed, stilted, and artificial. And even worse, the bearer of the persona relentlessly projects this insatiable demand for perfection onto you as well. They expect you to perform, to seamlessly fit in, to dutifully collaborate with their meticulously staged theatrical production. If you dare to express something that deviates from the carefully scripted narrative, a flash of intense emotion, a flicker of self-doubt, a pang of deep-seated pain, they immediately recoil, become visibly uncomfortable, and emotionally shut down. Because anything that even remotely reminds them of what they have so painstakingly repressed within themselves becomes utterly unbearable to witness. Jung chillingly warned that this pervasive type of identification with the persona represents one of the gravest threats to the process of individuation, the arduous, lifelong journey of self-knowledge and integration of the unconscious. For him, the true danger materializes when the individual becomes hypnotized by the role they are playing, tragically believing that they truly are what others perceive them to be. And that is precisely where the greatest risk lies. When someone lives solely to be accepted, relentlessly seeking recognition, desperately craving praise, they become an unwitting hostage to their own elaborately constructed facade. And everything that is genuinely authentic within them dies a slow, suffocating death behind the carefully applied veneer. Living with someone like this can gradually erode your own sense of spontaneity. You begin to police yourself, meticulously measuring your words, selectively hiding the aspects of yourself that don't quite align with their meticulously crafted ideal narrative. Slowly, insidiously, you too begin to wear a mask of your own and don't even notice it happening. Simply coexisting with a bearer of the persona isn't just psychologically artificial, it's dangerously contagious. But there is something even darker lurking beneath the surface. Because when an individual relentlessly represses their true feelings, stifling their authentic thoughts and ruthlessly denying their deepest desires for far too long, these unacknowledged aspects of the self don't simply vanish into thin air. They accumulate, fester, and ferment within the dark recesses of the unconscious until they eventually metamorphose into something far more sinister: the shadow. And then we enter an even more perilous territory, the realm of denied emotions that inevitably return with explosive force. In the next section, we will delve into the chilling figure of the owner of the repressed shadow, the individual who stubbornly refuses to acknowledge their own dark side until it inevitably explodes, unleashing its pent-up fury upon the unsuspecting world around them. There exists a certain type of individual who leads a life of meticulous control, a life that is polished to a blinding sheen, a life that is relentlessly restrained, consistently correct, and unfailingly polite. But beneath this carefully constructed veneer of emotional equilibrium lies a volatile force, seething with the potential to break free at any moment. Because everything that they deem wrong, ugly, or socially unacceptable is simply pushed down, down, down into the deepest, darkest basement of the soul. It is neither overcome nor transformed. It is merely ruthlessly repressed. This is the very essence of the owner of the repressed shadow, an individual who desperately attempts to maintain a facade of perpetual light until the darkness inevitably seizes control. Carl Jung dedicated a significant portion of his life's work to understanding the complex and often terrifying nature of the shadow. In Ion, he chillingly declares, "The shadow is everything that the individual refuses to recognize in themselves and yet insists on manifesting in some way." We are not talking about something external, something separate from ourselves. The shadow is not the evil that plagues the world. It is not the other. It is not the enemy lurking beyond the borders. The shadow is, fundamentally, an internal phenomenon. It is the raw, visceral hatred that you stubbornly refuse to admit you harbor. It is the gnawing envy that you desperately attempt to rationalize away. It is the vibrant sexuality that you shamefully repress. It is the burning ambition that you cleverly disguise as humble self-effacement. Everything that you vehemently reject within yourself does not simply disappear. It inevitably transforms into shadow, and as Jung so wisely taught, what you stubbornly refuse to make conscious will inevitably direct your life, and you will tragically call it destiny. The owner of the repressed shadow does not initially appear to be dangerous. On the contrary, they are frequently admired, praised for their discipline, recognized for their kindness, and lauded for their helpfulness. But there is always something unsettlingly off about them. They exhibit a peculiar intolerance for weakness in others. They react poorly to displays of authentic spontaneity. They are visibly bothered by the expression of intense emotions. They always seem to be emotionally charged, yet they mysteriously never quite explode. Until they do. And when that inevitable explosion occurs, it is utterly devastating. This individual exists in a perpetual state of heightened emotional vigilance. They rigidly deny themselves the freedom to feel, and for that very reason, they relentlessly condemn those who dare to do so. They refuse to allow themselves to be heard, and for that very reason, they relentlessly attack those who dare to speak their truth. They become aggressively moralistic, relentlessly demanding, and pathologically controlling. But all of this is merely a desperate, misguided attempt to keep the roiling unconscious firmly under their iron-fisted control. Jung was unequivocally clear. The stronger the persona, the more repressed the shadow. And the more repressed the shadow, the more brutal its eventual manifestation will inevitably be. You can easily identify this pattern in individuals who exhibit disproportionate reactions to seemingly minor provocations, who explode over trivial matters, who harbor grudges for years on end, and who sabotage relationships in a passive-aggressive manner. These are the archetypal difficult people whom no one can quite understand. Why are they so relentlessly bitter, so perpetually resentful, so habitually critical? The answer, invariably, lies dormant within the shadow, unintegrated, unrecognized, and utterly unaccepted. And here is the most crucial point to grasp. The shadow is not solely composed of negative traits. Jung painstakingly clarified that it also contains your denied potential, your repressed creativity, and your hidden strength. But when the shadow is ignored, all of these potent forces are tragically transmuted into poison. And this insidious poison inevitably contaminates the relationship, pollutes the surrounding environment, and most devastatingly, infects those who are closest to the poisoned individual. Living with the owner of the repressed shadow is akin to living next to a volatile emotional minefield. You never know where you are stepping until the devastating explosion throws you violently to the ground. But this relentless repression doesn't spontaneously arise from nowhere. More often than not, it is fueled by a deeply ingrained illusion of superiority, by a rigidly defined moral ideal that tragically twists guilt into a tool of manipulation and control. This is precisely where we enter the territory of the next archetypal figure, the moral controller, an individual who not only ruthlessly represses their own desires, but also subtly makes you feel deeply guilty for daring to live out yours. In the next section, we will unflinchingly unmask this particular type, whom Jung considered to be one of the most formidable obstacles to achieving true psychic freedom. The self-appointed guardian of virtue who desperately hides their own raging demons. Not every executioner wields a sword. Some wield crosses, adhere to rigid rules, cling to outdated dogmas, and relentlessly spout ready-made, cliché-ridden phrases. These are the individuals who vehemently claim to be driven by the unwavering principles of ethics, unwavering adherence to righteousness, and unwavering devotion to morality. But deep down, they are relentlessly imprisoning both themselves and others within a suffocating cage meticulously crafted from guilt and shame. Jung was acutely aware of this destructive archetype. For him, when morality is perversely twisted into a mere facade, it becomes one of the most insidiously effective forms of psychic repression. This is precisely the case with the moral controller, an individual who, instead of embarking on the difficult journey of integrating their own shadow, relentlessly projects it onto the behavior of others, vehemently condemning them for the very things that they cannot or will not accept within themselves. You have undoubtedly encountered someone like this in your life. These are the individuals who are quick to point accusatory fingers, but who stubbornly refuse to ever turn their gaze inward. They aggressively position themselves as shining examples of impeccable behavior, not because they genuinely are, but because they desperately need to maintain a carefully constructed image of unwavering moral superiority. According to Jung, the greater the degree of repression, the more intense the individual's compelling need to project their shadow onto others. And that is precisely what the moral controller does. They strategically transform others into convenient sinners, rebellious deviants, and morally bankrupt individuals in order to conveniently avoid facing their own tangled web of desires, forbidden impulses, and glaring contradictions. The problem is that unlike a common emotional manipulator, the moral controller genuinely believes that they are doing good. They are sincerely convinced that they are correcting, saving, or educating the other person. And this misguided belief makes their insidious influence even more toxic, because it is cunningly cloaked in an aura of unimpeachable authority, cloaked in a carefully constructed veil of good intentions, and cloaked in a perverse form of spiritually twisted to fit their own narrative. Their relentless criticism is invariably accompanied by disingenuous phrases such as, "This is for your own good. You'll thank me for it later." Or, "Someone needs to tell you the truth, and that someone is me." But this purported truth is far from neutral. It is always heavily laden with their own unconscious projections. In Ion, Jung extensively dissects the figures of Christ and the Antichrist, portraying them as archetypes of wholeness and dissociation. The moral controller sincerely believes that they are embodying the shining light of righteousness, but they completely, willfully ignore the raging darkness that lurks within their own psyche. They strategically project evil onto others in order to desperately maintain the illusion of purity within themselves. And this tragic blindness renders them dangerous, incapable of perceiving the nuanced complexity of the human soul. If you live in close proximity to someone like this, you may find yourself constantly feeling guilty, as if you are always falling short, always doing something wrong. Even when you are simply existing, you feel watched, judged, diminished. And the most perverse aspect of this insidious dynamic is that you often internalize their relentless judgment. You begin to systematically repress the very parts of yourself that are inherently natural, unapologetically human, and vibrantly spontaneous, and you relentlessly mold yourself to conform to an ideal that is not, and never will be, truly yours. The twisted morality of the other person becomes your personal prison. This toxic dynamic is commonly observed within families, religious institutions, and other rigidly structured environments where unquestioning obedience is tragically confused with genuine virtue. Jung recognized this pattern as a very real threat to the process of individuation. For where there is excessive moralism, there is a corresponding absence of self-knowledge. The extreme moralist does not truly seek truth, they crave absolute control. And when they are unable to exert control over the external world, they relentlessly turn their attention to controlling the internal worlds of those around them. But the moral controller is not the only type of individual who is relentlessly guided by unconscious forces. There exists another type who is even more volatile, inherently unstable, and tragically unpredictable: the complexed individual. While the moralist ruthlessly represses and strategically projects, the complexed individual is helplessly dominated by unconscious contents and reacts solely from them, tragically resembling a puppet dancing on invisible emotional strings. In the next section, we will delve into this explosive territory where conscious thought loses its grip and festering traumas seize the reins of the psyche. Prepare yourself to encounter the type of person who can enthusiastically embrace you today and brutally destroy you tomorrow without even knowing why. Imagine what it would be like to live with an individual who is, in one moment, sweetly affectionate, generously giving, and warmly supportive, and in the very next moment explodes in a fit of blind rage, coldly retreats into stony silence, or vehemently accuses you of something that never even crossed your mind. A well-intentioned compliment abruptly transforms into a veiled demand. A playful joke unexpectedly becomes a personal attack. A simple gesture of affection is wrongly interpreted as a threatening invasion. No matter what you do, it perpetually feels as though you are treading on dangerously unstable ground. This is the agonizing reality for those who live alongside a person who is helplessly dominated by unconscious complexes. The complex, according to Jung, are autonomous nuclei of raw emotion and deeply ingrained memory that reside in the unconscious and are capable of wresting control of consciousness at a moment's notice. They are akin to fragmented personalities residing within us, brought into existence by past traumas, festering psychic wounds, and unresolved emotional experiences. In psychological types, and also in the ego and the unconscious. Jung meticulously describes how these complexes can directly interfere with an individual's behavior, causing them to react not to the present moment, but to the haunting echoes of the past. A seemingly innocuous comment unconsciously connects to an old wound of abandonment, rejection, or public humiliation, and those who are unfortunate enough to be nearby are forced to pay the price. The complexed individual is often tragically unaware that they are being relentlessly guided by these invisible internal forces. When they react with blinding fury, overwhelming sadness, or exaggerated resentment, they sincerely believe that they are being rational, that their reaction is logical and justified. But they are tragically mistaken. They are not reacting to the present moment at all. They are merely reliving undigested, unresolved emotions from the past. And the most insidious aspect of this destructive dynamic is that it does not occur consistently. Instead, it occurs in sporadic, unpredictable lapses. There are unsettling emotional explosions interspersed with fleeting moments of lucidity, genuine affection, or sincere regret. This irregularity is precisely what makes forming a bond with such an individual so profoundly confusing and so strangely addictive. You start to mistakenly believe that they are not always like this, that sometimes they are truly wonderful. And that persistent glimmer of hope is what keeps you irrevocably hooked, because there are indeed moments of genuine connection, moments of authentic affection. But these moments are inevitably followed by unpredictable ruptures, where you suddenly find yourself trapped in the midst of an inexplicable, emotional storm that you simply cannot understand. And in a desperate attempt to restore some semblance of harmony, you strategically mold yourself to their ever-shifting needs, meticulously adapt to their unpredictable mood swings, and painstakingly shrink the scope of your own being. You begin to strategically avoid certain topics, meticulously measure your words, and cautiously walk on eggshells, all in a desperate attempt to avoid inadvertently waking the monster that is perpetually sleeping within the other person. But here is the brutal, unvarnished truth. That monstrous creature is not, and never will be, awakened by you. It is always there, lurking just beneath the surface, endlessly latent and perpetually hungry, patiently waiting for any seemingly insignificant trigger to emerge. And when it inevitably does emerge, it mercilessly consumes everything in its destructive path. For Jung, unrecognized complexes ultimately end up colonizing the entire psyche. They speak for you, relentlessly feel for you, and compulsively act for you. And in the case of the complexed individual, this hostile takeover happens with alarming frequency. They may be helplessly dominated by a crippling complex of inferiority, a pervasive complex of martyrdom, a consuming complex of abandonment, or a paranoid complex of persecution, each with its own entrenched narratives, its own overwhelming emotions, and its own insatiable demands. And the more desperately you try to maintain a fragile peace, the more relentlessly you feed the dangerous illusion that it is somehow possible to control the uncontrollable. Being in close proximity to someone like this is to live in a state of perpetual high alert. There is never any true emotional stability. The present moment is perpetually contaminated by the ghosts of the past. And sooner or later, you will inevitably begin to absorb these insidious ghosts. You will begin to doubt yourself, your memory, your very sanity. And without even realizing it, you too are slowly being colonized by the other person's relentlessly oppressive unconscious. But the most dangerous part is yet to come. Because while the complexed individual erratically oscillates between emotional extremes, there exists another type of person who does not shout, does not explode, and does not overtly accuse, but who subtly consumes your energy until you have absolutely nothing left to give. In the next and final section, we will dissect the chilling figure of the psychic vampire, the individual who feeds relentlessly on your precious time, devours your undivided attention, and drains your boundless empathy, ultimately leaving you exhausted, depleted, and utterly empty. And with them, we will conclude this painful cycle by revealing what Jung truly believed to be the ultimate way out of the suffocating confines of the unconscious. Some people are not interested in your mere presence. They are only interested in consuming your valuable energy. And they will relentlessly do everything in their power to drain it, not through brute violence nor through explicit aggression, but through subtle, persistent demands, through chronic displays of victimhood, and through cunning manipulations of emotional dependency skillfully camouflaged as genuine affection. This is the insidious method employed by the psychic vampire, the most silent and insidious form of emotional draining that Carl Jung ever warned us about, even if not explicitly by that particular name. Because in Jungian language, this is the tragic symbol of the unresolved symbiotic relationship, the pathologically unhealthy bond that relentlessly hinders psychic growth and slowly dissolves the defining contours of the self. Jung, in various revealing passages of The Ego and the Unconscious, and in Aeon, chillingly illustrates that one of the greatest threats to the process of individuation, the arduous path towards achieving wholeness, lies in the formation of symbiotic relationships, where two individuals tragically fail to recognize themselves as separate, autonomous entities, but rather see themselves as mere psychic extensions of one another. The psychic vampire thrives precisely in this type of codependent connection. They require your constant attention, demand your daily emotional comfort, and expect you to be unconditionally available to them at all times. But behind their carefully constructed facade of unrelenting neediness lies a bottomless void that is not, and never will be, yours to fill. You initially offer your support, then generously give your precious time, then reluctantly tolerate subtle forms of emotional abuse in the misguided name of unwavering understanding, until you eventually realize with a sinking heart that all of your energy is being relentlessly drained and that you no longer possess the ability to discern where the other person ends and where you, the true you, even begin. The resulting exhaustion is profound. It is not merely physical, it is utterly existential. It feels as though your very soul is slowly being devoured, drop by agonizing drop, day after relentless day. Jung poignantly spoke of those individuals who, tragically unable to sustain themselves psychically, desperately attach themselves to others, behaving more like insidious emotional parasites than like authentic human beings. And as brutally harsh as it may seem, this is the unvarnished truth. The psychic vampire is fundamentally disinterested in growth. They are instead obsessed with being passively carried. But the danger does not solely lie in the overwhelming exhaustion. It lies in the insidious dissolution of the self. You begin to feel overwhelmingly guilty for even daring to desire your own personal space. You are ruthlessly branded as selfish for even contemplating moments of blessed silence. You are coldly labeled as heartless for daring to crave the safety of emotional distance. Because the psychic vampire is a master of reversing roles. They effortlessly transition from portraying themselves as the helpless victim to relentlessly casting you as the ruthless accuser. They magically transform themselves from perpetually needy individuals to cunning manipulators. And before you even realize what is happening, you find yourself relentlessly living solely to avoid any hint of a crisis, desperately trying to maintain an illusion of peace, and hopelessly struggling to sustain a deeply unhealthy bond that is slowly killing you from the inside out. Jung offers us a viable path to make the unconscious conscious. And this transformative path applies both to others and, crucially, to ourselves. Because perhaps at some dark point in your own life, you too have unknowingly been a psychic vampire or a complexed individual, or even a bearer of the persona. None of us are truly immune. We all carry the weight of the shadow within us. We all bear the scars of deep-seated pain. The crucial difference lies in who courageously chooses to honestly look within, and who instead chooses to project that festering weight onto the unwitting souls of others. This video has served as a mirror, reflecting the insidious dynamics that relentlessly bind us, relentlessly hurt us, and relentlessly keep us in a state of unconsciousness. If you have made it this far, it signifies that you are finally ready to truly see, to unflinchingly name, and to bravely break free. And this recognition represents the very first and the most powerfully transformative form of true freedom. It is not about laying blame on others. It is about resolutely stepping out of the hostage position and reclaiming sovereignty over your own precious psyche. But beyond this jungle, there is another reality.